Los Angeles International Airport, Terminal 5. 6:45 on a Tuesday morning, and the place hummed with that particular brand of chaos that belonged only to departures. Rolling luggage competing with overhead announcements, passengers clutching coffee cups like lifelines, children whining about early wake-up calls. Outside, the June sun was already heating the tarmac to a shimmer. Inside, the climate-controlled bubble smelled of Cinnabon and jet fuel, an olfactory contradiction that somehow felt right. Marcus Blake moved through the crowd, like water finding its level. He wore a charcoal gray hoodie that cost $995, but looked like it came from Target. The joggers were Brunello Cucinelli, $850, but they'd been through enough washes that the designer tag had faded to illegibility. His sneakers were white Nike Air Force Ones, scuffed at the toes, laces double knotted. A Patagonia backpack hung from one shoulder, the kind college kids carried, sun-bleached and fraying at the seams. To anyone watching, and at LAX, everyone was watching, Marcus looked like a grad student stretching a budget, maybe an Uber driver between shifts. No one would guess the Patek Philippe hidden under his sleeve cost more than a Honda Civic. No one would guess the merger agreement folded in his backpack represented $4.2 billion in corporate restructuring. No one would guess that in approximately 8 hours this man would own the very airline he was about to board. That was the point. Marcus stopped at a Starbucks kiosk, ordered black coffee, paid cash. The barista didn't make eye contact. He found a bench near gate 52, set down the backpack with care. Those documents were irreplaceable, and pulled out his phone. 7 unread messages from David Sullivan, his chief operating officer. Marcus swiped them away. David would panic until the deal closed. That was his job. Marcus's job was to stay invisible until the exact right moment. He allowed himself a sip of coffee and a memory. 20 years ago, this same terminal, different gate, same airline. Marcus Blake at 18, freshman year UCLA on a full academic scholarship, flying to Chicago for the most important interview of his young life. Northwestern University had offered him a spot in their accelerated PhD program in economics, full ride, living stipend, research assistantship under a Nobel laureate. All he had to do was show up and impress the committee. The flight was booked on Apex Airways, economy seat 27F, a ticket he'd purchased with money saved from 2 years of weekend shifts at a Culver City grocery store. He'd worn a hoodie that day, too. Navy blue, UCLA logo across the chest, new enough that the fabric still smelled like the campus bookstore. He'd been reading Freakonomics, headphones looped around his neck, minding his business in the boarding area when the gate agent called his name. "Marcus Blake, can you step aside, please?" He'd complied, always complied. That was what his mother taught him. Don't give them a reason. The agent, a middle-aged white woman with blonde highlights and thin lips, studied his boarding pass like it was written in hieroglyphics. "When did you purchase this ticket?" 3 weeks ago, online. "And you paid with?" "Debit card, my debit card." She typed something into her computer, frowned, typed more. "I'm going to need to see another form of ID." Marcus showed his driver's license, his student ID, his social security card, which he'd brought for the interview. "Wait here." She disappeared into the jetway, came back with a supervisor. The supervisor, a man with a graying mustache and a permanent squint, looked Marcus up and down. "We're going to need to search your bag." "Why?" "Random security check." It wasn't random. Marcus knew that. The white family boarding behind him hadn't been stopped. Neither had the businessman in the expensive suit. Just Marcus. Just the black kid in the hoodie with a backpack. They'd searched his bag, found textbooks, printouts of economic models, a folder with his transcript and recommendation letters. Found nothing suspicious because there was nothing suspicious. But by the time they'd finished, boarding had closed. The gate agent offered him a standby seat on the next flight 6 hours later. By then, the interview would be over. Marcus missed that interview, lost the Northwestern offer, stayed at UCLA, which wasn't a tragedy. He'd graduated summa cum laude, built a career, became a CEO by 32. But he never forgot the gate agent's face, the supervisor's squint, the way they'd looked at him like he was a problem to be solved rather than a passenger who'd paid for a seat. And he never forgot the airline, Apex Airways. For 20 years, Marcus watched that company, studied its financials, tracked its stock, noted its scandals. Apex had a pattern: discriminatory incidents swept under the rug, settlements paid quietly, a corporate culture that treated certain passengers like threats and others like royalty. The CEO, a man named Gerald Moss, ran the airline like a profit-maximizing algorithm with no regard for the human cost. Marcus had built Blake Ventures specifically to acquire companies like Apex, distressed assets with toxic cultures. He bought them, gutted the leadership, rebuilt them into something better. Some people called him a vulture. Marcus called himself a renovator. He didn't destroy companies. He saved them from themselves. And today, Apex Airways would learn what it felt like to be judged before you even opened your mouth. Marcus finished his coffee, tossed the cup, shouldered his backpack. Boarding for Flight 447 to New York, JFK had begun. First class and priority passengers only. He joined the line. Ahead of him, a woman in a Chanel suit and oversized sunglasses breezed through without a glance from the gate agent. Behind him, a man in a polo shirt and khakis scrolled his phone. Bored. Marcus reached the podium, boarding pass ready. The gate agent, Rebecca, according to her name tag, looked up. Her smile flickered. Didn't disappear entirely, but it changed, tightened, became professional instead of warm. "Sir, this is the priority lane. Economy boarding begins in 15 minutes. Marcus held out his boarding pass. Seat 1A, first class, paid in full 3 days ago. Rebecca took the pass, scanned it. The machine beeped green. Her eyes flicked from the screen to Marcus's face, back to the screen. She scanned it again, another green beep. "When did you book this ticket?" "Last week." "And you're sure this is your boarding pass?" Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same tightness from 20 years ago. He kept his voice level, almost gentle. "Yes, that's my name. That's my seat." Rebecca typed something into her computer. The man behind Marcus sighed loudly, impatient. Rebecca glanced at him, apologetic, then back at Marcus. "I'm going to need to see a second form of ID." "Why?" "Standard procedure." It wasn't standard. Marcus had flown first class on dozens of airlines. No one ever asked for a second ID when the boarding pass scanned clean. But he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, handed over his driver's license. Rebecca studied it like she was memorizing every detail. California license, Marcus Terrell Blake. Date of birth, address in Pacific Palisades. Everything legitimate. "And do you have the credit card you used to purchase the ticket?" The man behind Marcus muttered something under his breath. Rebecca ignored him. Marcus pulled out his American Express black card, the one with no spending limit, the one you couldn't apply for. "They invited you." He set it on the counter. Rebecca picked it up, turned it over, compared the name to the ID to the boarding pass. Her mouth tightened. She was running out of excuses. "Okay." She handed everything back, finally, reluctantly. "You're approved for boarding." No apology, no smile, just the boarding pass thrust back at him and a curt nod toward the jetway. Marcus took his documents, walked past her without a word. Behind him, the man in the polo shirt stepped up. Rebecca's voice transformed, bright and cheerful. "Good morning, sir. Heading to New York today?" Marcus didn't look back. He knew what he'd see. The jetway was cooler than the terminal, that strange liminal space between ground and sky. Marcus's footsteps echoed on the ribbed floor. He reached the aircraft door, turned left into first class, and stopped. The cabin was a study in manufactured luxury. Cream leather seats wide enough to nap in. Overhead bins trimmed in brushed aluminum. Ambient lighting that shifted from blue to amber depending on the time of day. At the front galley, a flight attendant arranged a vase of fresh orchids with the precision of a florist. Preparing for a wedding, she turned as Marcus entered. Her name tag read Vanessa. Late 30s, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, makeup flawless. She wore the Apex Airways uniform like armor. Navy blazer, silk scarf knotted just so, skirt hemmed exactly 2 inches above the knee per company regulations. Her smile was professional, practiced, the kind that came from years of greeting strangers at 30,000 feet. Then she saw Marcus. The smile didn't disappear. That would have been too obvious, too actionable. But it changed. The warmth drained out of it. The muscles around her eyes tightened. Her gaze traveled from his hoodie to his backpack to his scuffed sneakers and back up again. A journey that took less than 2 seconds but communicated volumes. "Excuse me." Her voice was silk over steel. "Economy seating is through the galley to the right." Marcus stopped 3 feet from her, close enough to see the tiny lines around her mouth that makeup couldn't quite hide, far enough to keep the interaction professional. "I'm in 1A. He held out his boarding pass. Vanessa took it, her French manicure clicking against the paper. She glanced at it, then at the manifest on her tablet, then back at Marcus. Her jaw tightened. Terrence Blake. Marcus, just Marcus. She tapped her tablet, scrolling through the passenger list, found his name. Seat 1A, paid in full. No flags, no notes, nothing that would give her grounds to question it, but she tried anyway. "When did you book this seat?" "A few days ago." "And you purchased it yourself?" Marcus felt the question beneath the question. "Did someone give you this ticket? Did you steal it? Are you sure you belong here?" "Yes, I purchased it myself." Vanessa's lips pressed into a line. She handed back the boarding pass without meeting his eyes. "Fine. Overhead bin for your bag. Try not to disturb Mr. Caldwell in 1B. He's a frequent flyer." The emphasis on frequent flyer landed like a slap, as if Marcus wasn't, as if he didn't belong, as if the only way he could possibly afford this seat was luck or charity or fraud. Marcus said nothing. He lifted his backpack into the overhead bin, carefully, because $4.2 billion in merger documents didn't respond well to rough handling, and slid into seat 1A. The leather sighed under his weight. He buckled his seatbelt, pulled out his phone, opened his email. Vanessa moved past him to greet the next passenger. A man in his early 60s with silver hair, a cashmere sweater, and the air of someone who'd never been told no in his life. He settled into 1B with a grunt, already reaching for the call button. Vanessa's transformation was instant. The coldness evaporated. Her smile became genuine, her voice warm. "Mr. Caldwell, so wonderful to see you again. How was your trip to Napa?" Preston Caldwell grinned, launching into a story about wine tastings and vineyard tours. Vanessa laughed in all the right places, touched his shoulder lightly when he made a joke, treated him like a beloved uncle rather than a paying customer. The contrast was surgical. Mr. Caldwell got warmth, familiarity, personalized service. Marcus got coldness, suspicion, the absolute minimum required by her job description. At the back of the first-class cabin, another flight attendant watched. Younger, maybe late 20s, brunette hair pulled into a ponytail. She hovered near the galley with a tray of hot towels, eyes darting between Vanessa and Marcus. Her name tag read Hannah. She'd seen the whole exchange, seen Vanessa's smile freeze, seen the boarding pass inspection, seen the way Mr. Caldwell was treated versus the man in the hoodie. Her face registered something between discomfort and resignation. Hannah caught Marcus looking. She glanced away quickly, busying herself with the towel tray. Boarding continued. The first-class cabin filled with the usual assortment of business travelers and retirees with money to burn. A couple in their 50s holding hands. A tech executive in a Patagonia vest, AirPods already in. A woman in yoga pants and a designer handbag, barefoot before the plane even pushed back. Everyone got the Vanessa smile. Everyone got the warm greeting. Everyone except Marcus. The passenger in 3C, a Latina woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a paperback, glanced at Marcus and offered a small smile. He nodded back. She was the first person since he'd boarded who'd looked at him like he was human. The cabin door sealed with a hydraulic thunk. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, smooth and authoritative. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Robert Delaney. We're looking at an on-time departure this morning, flight time to JFK, approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes. Should be a smooth ride once we get above this coastal haze. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you in New York before you know it." The engines spooled up. Marcus felt the familiar vibration through the seat. The plane lurched backward, began its slow crawl toward the runway. He pulled up the merger documents on his phone, scanned the final paragraphs of the acquisition agreement. Everything was in order. By the time this plane landed at JFK, Blake Ventures would control 51% of Apex Airways. Gerald Moss wouldn't know until the market opened, wouldn't be able to stop it even if he tried. The poison pill clauses had already been triggered and absorbed. The board would convene within 72 hours, Moss would be voted out, and Marcus would install new leadership committed to treating passengers like human beings instead of revenue streams. But first, he had to survive 5 hours and 40 minutes in this cabin. The plane reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Vanessa emerged from the galley with a service cart, all gleaming chrome and stocked with premium liquor. She started at the front of the cabin, working her way back row by row. Mr. Caldwell got Dom Perignon and a crystal flute. Vanessa poured it herself, chatting about his last flight, asking about his wife, the federal judge, laughing when he complained about the traffic on the 405. She treated him like royalty. He preened under the attention. Then she reached Marcus. The transformation was instant. The smile vanished. Her eyes went flat. She stood beside his seat, cart between them like a barricade, and spoke without looking at him. "Drink?" "Not, would you care for a beverage, sir? Not." "What can I get for you?" "Just drink. One word. Perfunctory. Cold." Marcus glanced at the cart. He could see the champagne chilling in ice. The premium vodka, the top-shelf scotch, the selection of craft beers. But he wasn't interested in testing her. Not yet. "Sparkling water, please." Vanessa's jaw tightened. Her hand hovered over the cart, then moved to the lower shelf where the cheaper options lived. "We're out of sparkling." Marcus looked at the cart. There on the top shelf, chilling next to the Dom Perignon, were 3 bottles of Perrier. Green glass. Unmistakable. Unopened. He looked at Vanessa. She looked at the wall behind him. "Tap water's fine." She grabbed a plastic cup, not glass, not crystal, just a disposable cup like they used in economy, and filled it from a pitcher. Filled it too full, right to the brim, so full that surface tension was the only thing keeping it from spilling. Then she set it on his tray table with just a little too much force. The water sloshed over the rim, not a lot. Just enough to spread across the tray, seep under his phone, pool against the edge of his laptop case. Marcus grabbed the case, lifted it quickly. The merger documents were inside, waterproof case, thank God, but the water kept spreading, dripping onto his joggers, soaking into the fabric. Vanessa watched it happen, didn't move, didn't offer a napkin, didn't apologize. "Oops." Her voice was flat, bored. "Maybe you shouldn't bring so much stuff into first class." The words landed like a punch. Stuff. Not belongings, not luggage, stuff. The language of dismissal. The language of someone who looked at Marcus and saw clutter, saw a problem, saw someone who didn't belong. Marcus felt the anger rise in his chest. Hot and familiar. He'd felt it at 18 in this same terminal. He'd felt it 1,000 times in boardrooms and country clubs and restaurants where hostesses looked at him and assumed he was there to bus tables. He'd learned to control it, channel it, use it as fuel, but it never stopped burning. He said nothing, just pulled a napkin from the holder, mopped up the water, set his phone aside to dry. His joggers were soaked. The merger documents were safe, but his patience was thinning. Hannah, the younger flight attendant, stood near the galley. She'd watched the whole thing. Her face registered guilt, discomfort, the clear knowledge that what Vanessa had done was wrong. But she didn't say anything, didn't offer help, didn't bring Marcus a towel or a fresh drink. She just stood there, frozen by the same calculation that kept whistleblowers silent in every industry. Speak up and lose your job. Vanessa moved on to the next row, her smile returning as she greeted the couple in their 50s. Marcus dried his phone, checked the screen for damage. Everything still worked. He opened his messages, typed out a text to David Sullivan. Marcus, on the plane, everything on schedule. David's response came within seconds. David, Moss is going to lose his mind when he sees the filing. You sure you want to be in the air when it happens? Marcus, I want to be exactly where I am. He pocketed the phone and leaned back, closing his eyes. The anger was still there, simmering, but underneath it was something colder. Calculation. Vanessa had made a choice. Captain Delaney, whoever he was, had created the environment where that choice felt safe. Gerald Moss had built the system that rewarded people like Vanessa and punished people like Marcus. They'd all made choices, and in about 4 hours they'd all learn what happened when you underestimated the man in the hoodie. The plane droned on through clear skies. Marcus let the hum of the engines lull him into something close to meditation. He wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. Patience was a weapon, and he'd spent 20 years sharpening it. 90 minutes into the flight, Preston Caldwell woke from his nap. He stretched, groaned, pressed the call button. Vanessa appeared within seconds, all solicitous concern. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, can I get you anything?" Caldwell squinted at Marcus like he'd just noticed him for the first time. His gaze traveled from the hoodie to the still damp joggers to the scuffed sneakers. His mouth curled into something between a frown and a sneer. "Vanessa, is this seat assignment correct?" Vanessa glanced at her tablet, then at Marcus. Her expression was carefully neutral, but there was satisfaction in her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Blake is assigned to 1A. Caldwell's frown deepened. He leaned across the armrest, invading Marcus's space, speaking loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "I've sat in 1A for 20 years. It's my seat. This is highly irregular." Marcus kept his eyes closed, didn't engage, didn't rise to the bait. 20 years of boardroom negotiations had taught him when to speak and when to let silence do the work. Caldwell turned back to Vanessa, his voice rising. "I'm a platinum member. I've flown 300,000 miles with Apex. Surely there's been some mistake." Vanessa's face registered sympathy, concern, the kind of performative distress that came from years of placating demanding passengers. "I understand, Mr. Caldwell. Unfortunately, the system shows Mr. Blake purchased this seat. I don't have the authority to change assignments mid-flight." Caldwell huffed, sat back in his seat, glared at Marcus with the kind of entitlement that came from decades of getting his way. "Young man," the phrase dripped with condescension, "would you mind moving to another seat, perhaps in economy? I'm sure Vanessa can arrange an upgrade for you later." Marcus opened his eyes, looked at Caldwell. The man was 62, maybe 65, silver hair perfectly styled, cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent. His wedding ring was platinum, his watch was a Rolex, and his sense of superiority was so ingrained it had become part of his posture. "I paid full price for this seat. I'm not moving." The words were calm, polite, but firm, non-negotiable. Caldwell's face flushed. Red crept up his neck, spread across his cheeks. Do you know who I am? No. My wife is a federal judge, Judge Margaret Caldwell, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I've been flying Apex for longer than you've been alive. I always sit in 1A. It's tradition. Marcus met his gaze, unblinking. Traditions change. Caldwell sputtered, turned to Vanessa, who hovered nearby, clearly unsure how to de-escalate. This is unacceptable. I want to speak to the captain. Vanessa's expression shifted. The sympathy was gone, replaced by something harder. She looked at Marcus, and in that look he saw the decision being made. Caldwell was a platinum member. Marcus was a stranger in a hoodie. The choice wasn't difficult. Of course, Mr. Caldwell, I'll get Captain Delaney right away. She disappeared into the galley. Marcus heard the intercom buzz, heard Vanessa's voice, low and urgent. He couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He knew what was coming. 2 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Robert Delaney stepped out, mid-50s, graying hair, a paunch that strained against his uniform. His face had the ruddy complexion of a man who enjoyed his scotch. He surveyed the first-class cabin with the air of a sheriff walking into a saloon. Vanessa intercepted him, spoke in a whisper. Delaney listened, nodded, his expression hardening. Then he walked to Marcus's row, stood in the aisle, arms crossed. Sir, I'm going to need you to move to a different seat. Marcus didn't stand, didn't raise his voice, just looked up at the captain with the same calm he'd shown Caldwell. On what grounds? Mr. Caldwell is a valued member of our loyalty program. He's requested his usual seat. I'm asking you, as a courtesy, to accommodate him. I have a valid ticket for this seat. I paid for it. I'm not moving. Delaney's jaw tightened. His voice dropped an octave, became harder. On my aircraft, I have final authority over passenger seating. If I determine that a seat reassignment is necessary for the comfort and safety of all passengers, you're required to comply. The logic was circular, absurd. Marcus's presence wasn't a safety issue. It was a comfort issue. Caldwell's comfort, not safety. But Delaney had the authority, and he knew it. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'd like to document this conversation for the record. Delaney's face flushed. His hand shot out, not quite grabbing the phone, but gesturing sharply. Put that away. You're creating a disturbance. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. Mr. Caldwell is the one demanding I move. How is that a disturbance on my part? Vanessa appeared at Delaney's shoulder, her voice low and urgent. Captain, perhaps we should... Delaney cut her off with a look. Then he leaned down close enough that Marcus could smell coffee and cologne, and spoke in a voice meant only for him. I'm going to give you one more chance to handle this like a gentleman. Move to another seat and we'll forget this ever happened, or we can do this the hard way. Marcus held his gaze. 20 years of anger crystallized into a single cold certainty. He wasn't moving. Not for Caldwell. Not for Delaney. Not for anyone. I'm not moving. Delaney straightened. His face was stone. Then you're deplaning. Vanessa, call security. The cabin went silent. Every passenger within earshot turned to watch. The couple in row 5, the tech executive in row 4, the woman in 3C with the paperback, her eyes wide with alarm. Vanessa hesitated for just a second. Then she picked up the intercom handset, pressed a button. This is Flight 447. We need airport security at Gate 52. Uncooperative passenger, first class. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the echo of 18 years old and a missed interview and a future derailed. But this time was different. This time he had the resources to fight back. This time he wasn't just a kid with a dream. He was a CEO with a plan. He pulled out his phone again, slower this time, deliberate. Delaney watched him with narrowed eyes. I'm calling my attorney. You can call him from the terminal. Marcus stood, not aggressive, just rising from his seat to retrieve something from the overhead bin. But Vanessa gasped, theatrical and sharp, her hand flying to her chest. He's standing up! Captain, he's threatening me! Marcus froze. He wasn't threatening anyone. He was standing. That was all. But Vanessa's shriek echoed through the cabin, and suddenly everyone was staring, and the narrative was writing itself in real time. Delaney stepped between Marcus and Vanessa, his bulk filling the aisle. "Sit down, now. I'm just getting my—" "I said sit down." Marcus raised his hands, palms out, the universal gesture of surrender. He lowered himself back into the seat, moving slowly, making no sudden movements. But the damage was done. Vanessa was breathing hard, her hands still on her chest. Delaney looked like a man who'd just averted a disaster. And Marcus, sitting calmly with his hands visible, looked like the threat. Hannah stood frozen near the galley, her face pale. She'd seen the whole thing. Seen Marcus simply stand up, seen Vanessa's performance, seen the captain's overreaction. But she said nothing, did nothing, just watched. "I'm not leaving," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I paid for this seat. You're discriminating against me." Delaney's laugh was short, bitter. "Discriminating? This has nothing to do with—" He stopped himself, caught himself. But the pause said everything. Marcus held his gaze. "Nothing to do with what, Captain?" Delaney's face hardened. He turned to Vanessa. "How long until security gets here?" "They said 5 minutes." "Tell them to bring restraints." The word hung in the air, restraints, as if Marcus was violent, as if he was dangerous. He was sitting in a seat he'd paid for, hands visible, voice calm, and they were talking about restraints. Caldwell watched from 1B with smug satisfaction. The tech executive in row 4 had his phone out, filming. The woman in 3C looked horrified, and Vanessa stood with her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of righteousness and barely concealed vindication. Marcus stayed seated, hands on the armrests, breathing steady. He'd learned a long time ago that black men didn't get to be angry in public, didn't get to raise their voices, didn't get to make sudden movements. The rules were different, the margins thinner. One wrong move and the story would shift from discrimination to justification. So he waited, patient, calm, the same way he'd waited 20 years to buy this airline. The intercom crackled. Delaney picked it up, spoke in clipped tones. "This is Captain Delaney. We have a situation in first class. I'm requesting clearance to return to the gate." The response was muffled, but Marcus caught the hesitation in the air traffic controller's voice. Returning to the gate meant delays, missed connections, angry passengers. It wasn't a decision made lightly, Delaney pressed. "Passenger is refusing crew instructions and making threatening gestures. We need him removed for the safety of the flight." Threatening gestures. Marcus had stood up to reach the overhead bin. That was the threatening gesture. The controller's voice came back, clearer this time. "Flight 447, you're cleared to return. Maintain current altitude until further notice." The plane banked left. Passengers throughout the cabin groaned. Someone in economy shouted a question. The tech executive in row 4 kept filming. Hannah gripped the galley counter, knuckles white, and Marcus sat in seat 1A, hands visible, breathing steady, waiting for security to arrive so the real story could begin. Vanessa moved to the PA system, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay due to a passenger issue. We'll be returning to the gate momentarily. We apologize for the inconvenience." Brief delay, passenger issue. The language of euphemism. Marcus was the passenger issue. The man who'd paid for a seat and refused to give it up when a white man demanded it. The plane descended. Marcus felt the engines throttle back, felt the familiar pull of deceleration. Through the window, he could see LAX growing larger. The same sprawl of runways and terminals he'd left 40 minutes ago. His phone buzzed. David Sullivan. "David, just saw the flight tracker. Why are you heading back to LAX?" Marcus typed a response, one-handed, slow and deliberate. "Marcus, change of plans, about to get interesting." David, "Do I need to send lawyers?" Marcus, "Not yet, but have them ready." The plane touched down with a jolt, taxied back toward Terminal 5. The cabin was silent except for the whisper of recycled air and the occasional cough. Everyone was watching Marcus now, some with curiosity, some with hostility, some, like the woman in 3C, with something that looked like sympathy. Vanessa stood near the galley, arms crossed, waiting. Delaney had returned to the cockpit but left the door open, watching through the gap. Caldwell sat in 1B scrolling his phone, bored by the drama he'd caused. The plane stopped. The jetway connected with a thunk. The main cabin door opened, and 2 airport security officers stepped aboard. The first officer through the door was a white man in his mid-30s, barrel-chested, with the kind of build that came from high school football and too many years behind a desk. His name tag read Mitchell. Behind him came a younger woman, Officer Stephanie Grant, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Mitchell's hand rested on his belt, not quite touching the zip cuff pouch but close enough to signal intent. Vanessa intercepted them before they'd cleared the galley, her voice low and urgent but loud enough for Marcus to hear every word. "He's in 1A. Refused direct orders from the captain. Made threatening movements toward me. We need him off the aircraft immediately." Mitchell's eyes found Marcus, swept over the hoodie, the backpack still in the overhead bin, the calm posture. His expression hardened into something Marcus recognized from 20 years of being black in America. Presumed guilty. Threat assessment complete before a single question was asked. Grant hung back, her hand on her radio, eyes darting between Marcus and the passengers filming on their phones. She looked uncomfortable. Mitchell looked ready. Captain Delaney emerged from the cockpit, filling the space between galley and first row with authority he hadn't earned. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly. This passenger," he gestured at Marcus without looking at him, "assaulted my lead flight attendant and refused lawful crew instructions. I need him removed and detained." The word assaulted landed like a grenade. Marcus felt the shift in the cabin, the collective intake of breath, the way stories calcify into fact when someone in uniform says them out loud. He'd stood up. That was the assault, but Delaney's framing had already convicted him. Mitchell approached, stopping in the aisle beside row 1. His voice carried the forced calm of someone reading from a script. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us." Marcus kept his hands on the armrests, visible, non-threatening. His voice was quieter than Mitchell's, steadier. "I'd like to understand the charges first. I paid for this seat. I've been sitting here calmly. What specific law have I broken?" Mitchell's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to questions. Compliance was the expectation, resistance the excuse. "You've been asked to deplane by the captain. That's a lawful order under federal aviation regulations. Refusal to comply is a criminal offense. The captain asked me to give up a seat I purchased to accommodate another passenger's preference. That's not a safety issue, that's discrimination." The word hung there. Discrimination. Half the cabin was filming now. The tech executive in row 4 had his phone angled perfectly. The woman in 3C had set down her paperback, horror written across her face. Even Caldwell had stopped pretending not to care, watching the confrontation with barely concealed interest. Mitchell's expression shifted, not toward understanding, toward irritation. He took a step closer, his bulk filling Marcus's field of vision. "Sir, you can explain your side to a judge. Right now, you're coming with us. You can walk or we can assist you, your choice." Marcus calculated. Walking meant cooperation, meant leaving on his own power, meant preserving some dignity, but it also meant accepting the narrative. He'd assaulted a flight attendant. He'd refused orders. He was the problem passenger being escorted away while everyone else got to fly to New York on schedule. The story would be told without him, and he'd already lost. "I'll leave voluntarily, but first I need to make a phone call. That's my legal right." Mitchell's hand moved to his belt. Not the cuffs yet. The radio. "No calls. You're in federal custody. You can contact an attorney from the security office." Federal custody. Marcus wasn't under arrest. He hadn't been read rights, but the language was deliberate, designed to intimidate, to escalate, to justify whatever came next. He reached slowly for his phone, movements glacial, non-threatening. Mitchell's hand shot out, grabbed his wrist. Not hard, not yet, but firm enough to stop the motion. "I said no calls." Marcus looked at the hand on his wrist, looked at Mitchell. The cabin had gone completely silent. Even the engine hum seemed to recede. This was the moment, the fulcrum, the choice that would determine how the next 60 seconds unfolded. Marcus pulled his wrist back, gentle, slow, testing the grip. Mitchell held on, his fingers tightening. "Sir, don't resist." "I'm not resisting, I'm trying to access my property." "You're refusing a lawful order." Grant stepped forward, her voice softer than Mitchell's, but no less insistent. "Sir, please, just come with us. You can sort this out at the office. It doesn't have to be difficult." Her tone suggested it was already difficult, that Marcus was making it difficult, that cooperation was the only path to de-escalation, even though cooperation meant accepting a false narrative and abandoning his rights. Marcus kept his voice level, the same tone he used in boardrooms when junior analysts tried to bluff him with bad data. "I'm not under arrest. You haven't stated charges. I have a right to contact my attorney before submitting to any detention. If you're going to detain me, I need to know why." Mitchell's patience snapped. His grip shifted from Marcus's wrist to his upper arm, hauling him upward. The motion was sudden, forceful, designed to catch him off balance. Vanessa shrieked. The sound was pure theater, high-pitched and trembling, the audio equivalent of clutching pearls. She stumbled backward into the galley, hand over her heart, eyes wide. "He lunged at me! Did you see that? He tried to attack me!" Marcus had moved 6 inches, yanked upward by Mitchell's grip. He hadn't lunged, hadn't reached for Vanessa, hadn't done anything except exist in Mitchell's grasp. But her performance was Oscar-worthy, and half the cabin bought it. Mitchell spun Marcus around fast enough that his shoulder slammed into the overhead bin. The backpack shifted, threatened to fall. Marcus tried to reach up to stabilize it, $4.2 billion in merger documents, but Mitchell interpreted the movement as resistance. "Stop fighting!" Marcus wasn't fighting. He was being thrown around like a rag doll while trying not to lose his balance. But Mitchell had the narrative now, and the narrative was resistance, threat, danger. Grant moved in, pulling out a plastic zip cuff from her belt. Mitchell yanked Marcus's left arm behind his back, wrenching the shoulder. Pain shot down Marcus's arm, sharp and immediate. He bit back a gasp. Showing pain would be used as evidence of guilt somehow. The logic of these situations was never logic. It was power, and power didn't require consistency. Grant hesitated with the zip cuff, her eyes flicking to the phone's recording, to the passengers watching, to Marcus's face. She saw something there. Pain, maybe, or the sheer absurdity of treating a seated passenger like a violent criminal. But Mitchell was her partner, and partnerships in law enforcement meant loyalty over justice. She looped the zip cuff around Marcus's left wrist, pulled it tight. The plastic bit into skin, sharp and unforgiving. Blood flow cut off almost immediately. His fingers started to tingle. "That's too tight." Mitchell grabbed the right arm, yanked it back. Marcus's shoulders screamed in protest. He was flexible from years of yoga, but this wasn't a stretch. This was violence dressed up as procedure. The second zip cuff clicked into place, tighter than the first. Marcus felt his hands going numb, felt the plastic cutting into wrists, felt his pulse throbbing against the restraints. He tried to shift his arms, find a position that didn't cut off circulation entirely, but Mitchell's grip was iron. "Stop resisting." He wasn't resisting. He was trying not to pass out from the pain radiating up his arms. But resistance was whatever Mitchell decided it was. And right now, breathing was apparently resistance. They pulled him into the aisle. Marcus's feet tangled with the armrest, and he stumbled. Mitchell didn't compensate, didn't slow down, just kept hauling him forward. Marcus's knee hit the floor hard. The impact sent shockwaves up his leg. He tried to stand, but the zip cuffs threw off his balance, made it impossible to use his hands for leverage. Grant grabbed his other arm, and together they hauled him upright. The cabin tilted, or maybe that was his vision blurring from pain and adrenaline. Either way, Marcus was moving down the aisle now, pulled between two officers while 40-plus passengers watched and filmed and did absolutely nothing. Caldwell sat in 1B, scrolling his phone, bored. The couple in row 5 looked away, embarrassed. The tech executive kept filming, but his expression was neutral, observational, the kind of detachment that came from treating human suffering as content. Only the woman in 3C, Sophia, her boarding pass had read when she'd settled in, looked actively distressed, her hand pressed to her mouth, eyes shining with unshed tears. Hannah stood frozen near the galley, her face pale, hands gripping the counter. She'd watched Vanessa lie, watched Delaney escalate, watched Mitchell and Grant brutalize a passenger for the crime of sitting in a seat he'd purchased, and she'd done nothing. Fear was a powerful paralytic. Marcus didn't blame her, but he noted it. When this was over, when the lawsuits started flying and the investigations began, Hannah would have to decide whether her silence was worth her complicity. They reached the galley. The space narrowed. Mitchell pushed Marcus forward too fast, too rough. Marcus's shoulder clipped the metal galley counter. Pain exploded across his upper arm. He tasted copper, realized he'd bitten his tongue. Blood pooled in his mouth. He spat, couldn't help it, and the red spatter hit the galley floor. Vanessa gasped, stepping back like he'd thrown acid at her. "He's spitting! He's spitting blood at me!" It was absurd. Marcus had bitten his tongue when his shoulder hit the counter. He'd spat reflexively to avoid swallowing blood. But Vanessa's narrative was already written, and facts were just obstacles to be reinterpreted. Mitchell shoved harder. Marcus's head jerked forward, momentum carrying him past the galley into the jetway. His forehead connected with the metal frame of the doorway. Not hard enough to knock him unconscious, but hard enough that stars exploded across his vision. Warmth trickled down his temple. Blood. He could feel it, warm and wet, sliding past his eyebrow toward his cheek. They were in the jetway now, cooler air, ribbed floor, the sound of his own breathing, ragged and too fast. Marcus tried to slow it, tried to center himself, but his body was in full fight-or-flight mode, and there was nowhere to fight, nowhere to fly. Grant's grip on his arm loosened slightly. She'd seen the blood, seen the way his head had hit the doorframe. Her voice was quieter now, almost apologetic. "Sir, please stop struggling. You're only making this harder." He wasn't struggling. He was being dragged. But the script required his resistance to justify their force, so resistance was what they'd document regardless of reality. The jetway ended. They emerged into the terminal, bright fluorescent lights and recycled air and the stares of hundreds of travelers waiting at nearby gates. Marcus's face was bleeding. His wrists were zip-cuffed. His hoodie was torn at the shoulder where Mitchell had grabbed it. He looked exactly like what Mitchell needed him to look like, a criminal being subdued. A child pointed. The mother yanked the child's hand down, whispered something sharp. An elderly man in a wheelchair watched with watery eyes, shaking his head. A businessman with a rolling suitcase stopped, pulled out his phone, added to the collection of angles documenting Marcus's humiliation. Mitchell kept walking, pulling Marcus toward a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Grant swiped a keycard. The door clicked open. They pushed through into a hallway, cinder block walls painted institutional beige, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The sounds of the terminal faded. They were in the airport's backstage now, the administrative guts where problems got processed. Mitchell shoved Marcus into a small room. Concrete floor, metal table bolted to the ground, 2 chairs, 1 security camera in the corner, red light blinking. Mitchell pushed Marcus into one of the chairs. The zip cuffs made it impossible to sit comfortably. Marcus's shoulders screamed, his wrists throbbed. Blood dripped from his temple onto his hoodie. dark spots blooming on gray fabric. Mitchell stood by the door, arms crossed. Grant hovered near the table, looking like she wanted to offer a tissue but didn't dare. "We're going to wait here until LAPD arrives. You have the right to remain silent." "Am I under arrest?" Mitchell's jaw tightened. "You're being detained pending investigation." "Investigation of what? I sat in a seat I purchased." "You assaulted a flight attendant. You refused crew instructions. You resisted lawful detention." Each accusation was a distortion, a funhouse mirror version of events. But Mitchell believed them, or had convinced himself he did. It was easier that way. Easier to be the hero than to admit you'd just brutalized an innocent man for corporate convenience. Marcus leaned back, the movement sending fresh waves of pain down his arms. Blood dripped onto his lap. His phone was still in his pocket, confiscated but not yet removed. His backpack was still on the plane in the overhead bin, containing documents that would make all of this moot once David Sullivan triggered the acquisition. But first, he had to survive the next hour without bleeding out or losing circulation in his hands. Grant pulled out a radio, spoke quietly into it. Marcus caught fragments. "Head injury, possible medical, paramedic request." She sounded worried. Good. Someone should be worried. Someone should realize that zip-cuffing a non-violent passenger and slamming his head into a door frame was several steps past reasonable force. Mitchell's radio crackled. A voice Marcus didn't recognize, tinny and official. "Mitchell, we've got a situation. Video is already online. Passenger removal flight 447. It's blowing up." Mitchell pulled the radio close, stepped into the hallway. Marcus heard him swearing under his breath, heard the words viral and shitstorm and lawyer. When Mitchell returned, his expression had shifted. Still hostile, but now worried. Viral videos meant investigations. Investigations meant scrutiny. Scrutiny meant career consequences. Grant leaned against the wall, watching Marcus with something that might have been guilt. "Do you want some water? Or a cloth for your head?" Marcus met her eyes. She was young, probably thought she was doing the right thing, backing her partner, following orders. She'd learn eventually that orders weren't absolution, or maybe she wouldn't. Plenty of people went their whole careers without learning that lesson. "I want my phone call." Grant looked at Mitchell. Mitchell looked at the ceiling, calculating. Finally, he pulled Marcus's phone from an evidence bag, set it on the table, unlocked the zip cuffs just enough to free Marcus's hands. Blood rushed back into his fingers, painful and disorienting. Marcus flexed them, wincing, then picked up the phone. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline, pain, rage. He took a breath, steadied himself, scrolled through contacts, paused at David Sullivan. Too obvious. David would panic, send lawyers, escalate everything into a legal circus. That wasn't what Marcus needed, not yet. He scrolled further, found a number he hadn't called in months. Arthur Pennington, former colleague, now senior vice president at a financial intelligence firm that specialized in corporate acquisitions. Arthur owed Marcus a favor from a deal 3 years back. Time to collect. The phone rang twice. "Marcus, I thought you were on a flight." Arthur's voice was clipped, efficient, the sound of a man perpetually reviewing spreadsheets. "Change of plans. I need you to accelerate the Apex acquisition. Trigger it now." Silence. The kind of silence that meant Arthur was opening his laptop, pulling up files, recalculating timelines. "Now? We were scheduled for market open tomorrow. That's 12 hours from... I'm sitting in an LAX security holding room with a head injury and zip cuff marks on my wrists because Apex's crew just assaulted me. I want the acquisition filed, announced, and irrevocable before this plane takes off again." More silence. Typing in the background. Arthur processing, calculating, running scenarios. "Marcus, that's aggressive even for you. The optics are that I was violently removed from a flight by the airline I'm about to own. The optics are perfect. File the paperwork, call the SEC. Trigger the poison pill absorption. I want Moss to find out he lost his company while I'm still bleeding from his employees' incompetence." Arthur exhaled. It sounded like a laugh or maybe a prayer. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure about anything in my life. Okay, give me 8 minutes. I'll need to conference in the legal team, but we can push the filing through as an emergency measure. Securities Exchange Commission will flag it for unusual timing, but if we attach the incident report, do you have documentation? Marcus glanced at the security camera, red light blinking. I'm in a room with a security camera that's been recording since I was dragged in here, and there are approximately 12 passenger videos circulating online showing my removal. Documentation won't be a problem. Jesus, okay. 8 minutes. Stay on the line. The call went to hold, elevator music, tinny and absurd. Marcus set the phone on speaker, leaned back, winced as his shoulders protested. Grant was staring at him with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Mitchell was on his own radio talking in clipped tones to someone up the chain. Neither of them had processed yet what they'd stumbled into. They'd removed a passenger. It happened dozens of times a day across airports nationwide. They had no idea they'd just removed the man who was, at this exact moment, buying the airline they'd done it for. The hold music cut off. Arthur's voice returned, sharper now, energized. Marcus, we're live. Filing is submitted. SEC has acknowledged receipt. Poison pill triggers are absorbed as of... Typing sounds. 7:53 Pacific. Market won't react until open, but the acquisition is legally binding as of now. You own 51% of Apex Airways. Marcus closed his eyes, felt the weight of 20 years lift off his shoulders, felt the plan constructed over decades click into place like a lock turning. Notify Moss, personally. I want him to hear it from us before he hears it from Bloomberg. On it. Anything else? Yeah. Contact the FAA. Report this incident formally. Captain Robert Delaney, Flight 447, violently removed a passenger for refusing to give up a purchased seat to accommodate a VIP's preference. I want it on record before Apex's PR team tries to bury it. FAA complaint filed. This is going to get ugly, Marcus. It already is ugly. I'm just making sure the right people pay for it. He ended the call, set the phone down, looked at Mitchell and Grant, both of whom were staring at him like he'd just sprouted a second head. Mitchell recovered first, his voice hard with defensive aggression. Who were you talking to? Marcus smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just won a chess game his opponent didn't know they were playing. My investment team. They just finalized the purchase of Apex Airways. As of 2 minutes ago, I own the airline you just dragged me off of. The color drained from Mitchell's face. Grant actually stepped backward, her hand going to her mouth. They'd assaulted a passenger. Happens, but they'd assaulted the new owner of the company. That was a career-ending miscalculation. Mitchell rallied, but his voice had lost its certainty. You're lying. You're just trying to... Marcus's phone buzzed. He picked it up, unlocked it, pulled up Bloomberg News. The headline was already live. Breaking. Blake Ventures acquires controlling stake in Apex Airways. $340 million deal finalized in emergency filing. He turned the phone around, showed them the screen. Grant read it, her face going from pale to gray. Mitchell read it, and something behind his eyes shut down, the fight-or-flight response recalculating. He'd flown, too late for fighting. Footsteps in the hallway, fast, urgent. The door burst open. A man in an Apex Airways corporate polo, out of breath, phone pressed to his ear, stared at Marcus like he was looking at a ghost. Mr. Blake? I'm Jason Chen, station manager for Apex at LAX. I just got a call from corporate. They said, is it true? Did my crew... He trailed off, taking in the blood on Marcus's face, the torn hoodie, the zip cuff marks angry and red on his wrists. Oh my God! Marcus stood slowly, his body protesting every movement. He faced Chen, who looked like a man watching his career implode in real time. Your crew assaulted me because I refused to give up my seat to a platinum member who wanted it. Your captain authorized my removal. Your lead flight attendant lied about me threatening her. And these two officers, he gestured at Mitchell and Grant, used excessive force to remove me from an aircraft I now own. Chen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Mr. Blake, we had no idea. This is completely unacceptable. Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. The motion sent pain lancing through his shoulder, but he ignored it. Where's my backpack? I'm sorry, my backpack. Still on the plane, in the overhead bin above seat 1A. I need it, now. Chen fumbled with his radio, barked orders. Someone acknowledged. Marcus waited. His head throbbed, his wrists burned, his body was one massive ache. But he was standing. He was conscious, and in approximately 4 minutes he was going to walk back onto Flight 447 and watch Vanessa Cross and Captain Robert Delaney realize exactly who they'd just made an enemy of. Chen's radio crackled. The backpack was on its way. Marcus turned to Mitchell. Uncuff me. Mitchell hesitated. Grant moved first, pulling out a knife, cutting the zip cuffs. They fell to the floor, 2 plastic loops stained with blood. Marcus rubbed his wrists, circulation returning in painful pulses. His hands were mottled purple and red, the marks from the cuffs stark against his skin. Chen hovered, desperate to fix something, anything. Mr. Blake, we have a medical team on standby. We can have you seen immediately, and of course we'll cover all expenses. And I don't want a medical team. I want my backpack, and I want access to Flight 447. Sir, with respect, you've just been injured. Perhaps it would be better to... Marcus turned, and whatever Chen saw in his eyes made the man step back. I'm getting on that plane. You can help me or you can get out of the way. Choose quickly. Chen chose. He nodded, grabbed his radio, started issuing orders. Marcus walked to the door past Mitchell and Grant, who pressed themselves against the wall like he might detonate if they touched him. He stepped into the hallway, followed Chen toward the gate. His phone buzzed again. David Sullivan this time. David. What the hell, Marcus? Arthur just told me you filed early. Bloomberg is blowing up. Moss is having a meltdown. Are you okay? Marcus typed with thumbs that were still regaining feeling. Marcus. I'm fine. On my way back to the plane. This is about to get very interesting. David. You're getting back on the plane? The one that just assaulted you? Marcus. They don't know who I am yet. Not really, but they're about to. He pocketed the phone. They'd reached the gate. Through the window, Marcus could see Flight 447 still connected to the jetway, passengers visible through the small windows waiting. Vanessa would be in the galley, probably celebrating her victory. Delaney would be in the cockpit filing his report, painting Marcus as the villain. Caldwell would be in 1B, smug and satisfied. They had no idea what was coming. Chen swiped his keycard. The gate door unlocked. Marcus stepped through and the stairs started immediately. Passengers waiting for other flights, gate agents at nearby podiums, everyone turning to look at the man with blood on his face and torn clothes walking back toward a plane he'd been dragged off of 10 minutes earlier. The jetway felt longer this time, or maybe Marcus was just more aware of each step, each breath, each throb of pain radiating through his skull. He reached the aircraft door. A different flight attendant stood there now, a young man with wide eyes and a name tag that read Kevin. Kevin took one look at Marcus and went pale. Sir, are you... Marcus walked past him into the cabin. First class, the same seats, the same lighting, the same passengers, most of whom looked up from their phones and froze. Vanessa was in the galley, laughing at something Hannah had said. She turned as Marcus entered. Her laugh died. Her face went through a rapid evolution. Confusion, recognition, shock, and finally something that looked like terror. Captain Delaney's voice crackled over the intercom, oblivious. Folks, we apologize again for the delay. The passenger issue has been resolved and we're cleared for an on-time departure to New York. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for pushback. Marcus walked down the aisle. Blood dripped from his temple onto the carpet. Passengers shrank back. The tech executive in row 4 was filming again, phone aimed directly at Marcus's face. Sophia in 3C looked like she was about to cry. He stopped at row 1. Caldwell was still in 1B, scrolling his Wall Street Journal app, oblivious. Marcus's backpack sat in the aisle, retrieved from the overhead bin as requested. Vanessa finally found her voice. It came out small, uncertain. "Sir, you can't be here. You were removed from this flight. I'm calling the captain." Marcus picked up his backpack, unzipped it, pulled out a fresh shirt. He always traveled with a spare. White button-down, slightly wrinkled but clean. He pulled off the torn hoodie, wincing as the fabric caught on his injured shoulder. Blood had soaked through to his undershirt. He removed that too, standing in the first-class cabin of Flight 447, shirtless, bruised, bleeding, and completely unbothered. Vanessa stared. Hannah stared. Half the cabin stared. Marcus pulled on the fresh shirt, buttoned it slowly. Then he reached into the backpack again and pulled out what he'd really come for. A suit jacket, Tom Ford, charcoal gray. He'd brought it for the meeting in New York, the one where he'd planned to shake hands with Apex's board and discuss the transition. He shrugged it on. The transformation was immediate. Hoodie Marcus had been a threat. Suit Marcus was a businessman. Same person, different perception. He pulled out his phone one more time, opened his messages, found the group chat with his executive team, typed quickly. "Marcus, it's done. I'm on the plane, about to make the announcement. Arthur, you're insane. I love it. David, please don't get arrested again." Marcus pocketed the phone, looked at Vanessa, who'd backed up against the galley counter, all color gone from her face. "I need to speak to Captain Delaney. Now." Vanessa's hand shook as she reached for the intercom, pressed the button. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Captain, the passenger is back. He's asking to speak with you." Static. Then Delaney's voice, irritated and sharp. "What do you mean he's back? He was removed." Marcus took the handset from Vanessa's trembling hand, held it to his ear. "Captain Delaney, this is Marcus Blake. I need you to come out here. We have things to discuss." Silence on the other end, then cautious and hostile. "Mr. Blake, you were removed from this aircraft for assaulting a crew member. If you're back on this plane, you're trespassing. I'm calling security again." Marcus smiled at the handset, at Vanessa, at the passengers watching with phones raised and eyes wide. "Call whoever you want, Captain, but you should probably check Bloomberg first." He hung up, handed the receiver back to Vanessa. The cockpit door opened 30 seconds later. Delaney stepped out, face red, shoulders squared. He opened his mouth to deliver what was probably a rehearsed speech about authority and consequences. Then he saw Marcus, saw the suit, saw the blood, saw the phone Marcus was holding up, screen displaying the Bloomberg headline. Delaney stopped walking. His face went from red to white in the span of a heartbeat. Marcus kept his voice conversational, friendly even, the tone of a man stating simple facts. "Captain, as of 8 minutes ago, I own 51% of Apex Airways, which means I own this plane. I own your salary, and I own the authority to make decisions about who stays and who goes, so I'm going to give you the same choice you gave me. You can comply with my instructions, or we can do this the hard way." The cabin was silent, not the tense silence from before. This was different. This was the silence of witnesses watching a reversal so complete it defied comprehension. Delaney's mouth opened. No sound came out. He looked at Vanessa, at Marcus, at the phone, at the blood still trickling down Marcus's face. His brain was trying to process, trying to find a script for this scenario and coming up empty. Caldwell finally looked up from his phone, saw Marcus, saw the blood, saw Delaney frozen like a deer in headlights. His expression shifted from boredom to confusion to something approaching panic. Marcus turned to face the entire first-class cabin, raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Blake, CEO of Blake Ventures. As of a few minutes ago, I'm also the majority shareholder of Apex Airways. Approximately 40 minutes ago, I was violently removed from seat 1A, the seat I'd purchased, because this crew decided I didn't look like I belonged in first class. I'm back now to ensure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else on this airline, or any airline, ever again. The cabin erupted, not in protest, in applause. Economy passengers who'd heard everything through thin walls, business class passengers who'd watched the removal on their phones via viral video. Even a few first-class passengers who'd been recording joined in. Sophia in 3C was crying openly, clapping through tears. Only Caldwell sat silent, his face ashen, his phone clutched in white-knuckled hands. Marcus looked at Delaney, at Vanessa, at Hannah, who was crying too, but smiling, relieved and terrified in equal measure. We're going to New York, all of us, because I have meetings to attend. But when we land, Captain Delaney and Ms. Cross, you'll be met by federal authorities, FBI, not airport security. This went beyond customer service failures. This was assault under federal aviation law, and I'm pressing charges. Vanessa's legs gave out. She slid down the galley counter, landing on the floor, face buried in her hands. Delaney stood paralyzed, every ounce of authority drained out of him, and Marcus Blake, bleeding and bruised and victorious, walked to seat 1A and sat down. Flight 447 took off 40 minutes behind schedule. The delay meant missed connections for 18 passengers, cascading failures across the airline's network, and approximately $80,000 in compensation Apex Airways would have to pay. Marcus didn't care about the money. He cared about the silence. The cabin had transformed. Vanessa sat in the jump seat near the rear galley, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. Hannah moved through first class with mechanical efficiency, offering drinks and snacks with a shell-shocked expression. Captain Delaney hadn't spoken since Marcus's announcement, hadn't left the cockpit, hadn't acknowledged that his career was effectively over the moment those wheels touched down in New York. Caldwell had moved. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, he'd gathered his belongings and slipped into economy, claiming a middle seat in row 34. Better to be invisible than adjacent to the man whose life he'd helped destroy. Marcus watched him go without comment. Caldwell's cowardice would be documented, catalogued, used as evidence when the lawsuits started flying. Marcus sat in 1A, laptop open, reviewing the acquisition documents Arthur had rushed through. Everything was clean. The SEC filing was time-stamped at 7:53 Pacific. The poison pill absorption had triggered automatically, bypassing Apex's board entirely. Gerald Moss had learned about the takeover via a Bloomberg alert, same as everyone else. His first call had been to the company's legal team. His second had been to Marcus's office, where David Sullivan politely informed him that Mr. Blake was indisposed and would speak with him at the board meeting scheduled for Thursday morning. Moss's third call had been to the FAA, attempting to file a complaint about Marcus's behavior on Flight 447. That call had lasted approximately 90 seconds before the FAA representative informed Moss that they'd already received a formal complaint from Marcus Blake, documenting systematic discrimination and excessive force by Apex Airways personnel. Moss's complaint was filed in the system. Marcus's complaint triggered an immediate investigation. The laptop screen glowed with emails, Arthur updating him on media coverage, David coordinating with the legal team. Marcus's assistant Rebecca canceling his afternoon meetings and rescheduling for tomorrow. Everyone moving pieces on a chessboard Marcus had been setting up for 20 years. His temple throbbed where he'd hit the door frame. The bleeding had stopped, but dried blood itched along his hairline. He'd refused the paramedics at LAX, refused to delay the flight further, refused to show weakness. But now, 5 hours from New York, the adrenaline was fading and the pain was taking over. His wrists ached. His shoulder felt like someone had driven nails through the joint. His head pounded in rhythm with his pulse. Hannah appeared beside him, holding a first aid kit and looking terrified. "Mr. Blake, I'm not a paramedic, but I have training. Your head is still bleeding. Can I at least clean it?" Marcus closed the laptop, nodded. Hannah knelt in the aisle, opened the kit with trembling hands. She pulled out antiseptic wipes, gauze, medical tape. Her fingers shook as she reached toward his temple. "I'm sorry." The words came out barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at her. 29 years old according to her personnel file, which he'd pulled up an hour ago, 3 months with Apex, student loans totaling $82,000. Performance reviews that noted her kindness with passengers and reluctance to enforce punitive policies. She'd been written up twice for giving free drinks to families with crying children. Vanessa had authored both write-ups. For what? Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She dabbed at the wound on his temple, gentle despite her shaking hands. "I saw what she did. The water, the lies, everything. I should have said something. Should have stood up for you. But I was afraid I'd lose my job, and I have so much debt, and—" Her voice broke. Marcus waited while she composed herself, while she finished cleaning the wound and applied a bandage with more care than he'd expected. "You're not the one who needs to apologize." Hannah sat back on her heels, medical kit in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "But I didn't stop it. I watched you get hurt and I did nothing." Marcus had heard this confession before. Different contexts, different industries, same basic equation. Good people staying silent because the cost of speaking up felt too high. He'd built a career on understanding that calculation, on changing the incentives so that silence became more expensive than truth. "You're going to testify. When the investigations start, when the lawsuits get filed, you're going to tell exactly what you saw, and I'm going to make sure you don't lose anything for it." Hannah wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "I don't understand. Why would you help me? I didn't help you." "Because you're not the problem. You're a symptom. Vanessa, Delaney, Caldwell, they chose cruelty. You chose survival. I'm going to change the system so that survival doesn't require silence." Hannah closed the first aid kit, stood slowly. She looked at Marcus like he was speaking a language she wanted to learn but didn't quite understand yet. "What happens when we land?" "FBI meets the plane. Vanessa and Delaney get arrested. You give a statement, then you go home, get some rest, and wait for my assistant to call you about a new job." Her eyes widened. "A new job? You're not working for Apex anymore, not after what I'm about to do to this company, but you'll work for whatever comes after, if you want." Hannah nodded, speechless, and retreated to the galley. Marcus watched her go, then opened his laptop again. New email from Arthur. "Arthur, media is going insane. CNN wants an interview. So does NBC, ABC, Fox, and about 30 podcasts. What do you want me to tell them?" Marcus typed his response. "Marcus, tell them I'll make a statement after the board meeting. Not before. Let the story build." Arthur, "It's already built. You're trending on every platform. Hashtag Apex Air Assault has 4.2 million tweets. Half the country thinks you're a hero. The other half thinks you're staging a publicity stunt." Marcus, "Good. Controversy means attention. Attention means accountability. Let them argue." He closed the email, pulled up a new browser window, searched his own name. The results were overwhelming. Video after video of his removal, each from a different angle. The tech executive's footage showed Mitchell grabbing his arm. Sophia's video captured the moment his head hit the doorframe. Someone in economy had filmed through the gap between seats, catching Vanessa's theatrical performance when Marcus stood to reach the overhead bin. The comment sections were war zones. Half the comments expressed outrage at the treatment, solidarity with Marcus, calls for boycotts and resignations. The other half questioned his motives, his appearance, his right to be in first class in the first place. Some comments were overtly racist, using language Marcus had heard his entire life but never quite got used to. Others were more subtle, coded, the kind of dog whistles that let people be bigots while maintaining plausible deniability. He read them all, not because he enjoyed it, he didn't, but because he needed to understand the landscape. Public opinion was a tool, and like any tool, it had to be wielded carefully. The people defending him would become allies in the larger fight. The people attacking him would reveal the depth of the problem he was trying to solve. New email. This one from Gerald Moss himself. Marcus almost deleted it unread, then decided to indulge his curiosity. From gerald.moss@apexair.com to marcus.blake@blakeventures.com. Subject urgent, immediate discussion required. Mr. Blake, I've just been informed of the acquisition filing. While I respect your business acumen, I believe this situation has escalated due to misunderstandings on both sides. I'm confident we can reach a mutually beneficial arrangement that doesn't require the nuclear option you seem to be pursuing. I'm proposing we meet immediately upon your arrival in New York. I can have my legal team present a very generous offer for your shares well above market value, and we can discuss pathways to resolve the incident on Flight 447 in a manner that satisfies all parties. Time is of the essence. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Gerald Moss, Chief Executive Officer, Apex Airways. Marcus read it twice. The arrogance was stunning. Moss thought this was a negotiation, thought Marcus wanted money, wanted a payout, wanted to be bought off like the 47 other victims Apex had silenced with settlements and NDAs. Moss had no idea that money wasn't the point. The point was dismantling every structure that allowed men like him to treat human beings like inconveniences. Marcus hit reply. Gerald, thank you for your email. I'm not interested in selling my shares. I'm interested in attending Thursday's board meeting where I will vote to remove you from your position and install leadership that understands the difference between customer service and systematic discrimination. We have nothing to discuss before that meeting. I suggest you use the intervening time to update your resume. Regards, Marcus Blake. He hit send before he could second-guess the tone. Professionalism was overrated when dealing with people who'd built careers on oppression. The plane hit turbulence. Not severe, just enough to rattle the cabin and send a few passengers reaching for armrests. Marcus glanced out the window. They were over the Midwest somewhere. Vast stretches of farmland interrupted by the occasional town. From 35,000 feet, everything looked peaceful, orderly. The view from above always lied. His phone buzzed, text from David. David, just got off a call with the FBI. They're sending a team to JFK. Vanessa Cross and Robert Delaney will be arrested on federal charges the moment the plane lands. Assault on an aircraft, conspiracy to file false reports, violation of civil rights statutes. You're looking at a spectacle. Marcus. Good. Make sure the media knows when and where. I want cameras. David. You want cameras at an arrest? Marcus. I want everyone to see that actions have consequences, even at 35,000 feet. David. You're terrifying sometimes, you know that? Marcus. Only to people who deserve it. He pocketed the phone. The turbulence smoothed out. The cabin returned to its uneasy quiet. Marcus pulled up his files on Apex Airways, the research he'd been compiling for 5 years. Every complaint buried, every settlement paid, every pattern of discrimination documented and ignored. Victim number 12. Jamal Henderson, 19, black college student flying to his father's funeral. Stopped at the gate, searched 3 times, missed the flight, filed a complaint, received a form letter apology and a $50 voucher. Victim number 23, Dr. Anjali Mehta, 45, Indian-American professor of biochemistry, accused of stealing noise-canceling headphones that the airline had provided. Publicly humiliated in front of a full cabin, developed anxiety so severe she stopped flying altogether. Settled with Apex for $35,000 and an NDA. Victim number 38, Reverend Isaiah Thomas, 62, black, Baptist minister. Denied boarding because his clerical collar looked suspicious. Missed his daughter's wedding. Apex offered flight vouchers. He refused and wrote a letter to the CEO that was never answered. 47 victims, 89% people of color, 100% of complaints buried by Gerald Moss's office. Marcus had spent months tracking them down, interviewing them, documenting their stories. Most had moved on, accepted that fighting was futile, internalized the idea that this was just how the world worked. A few were angry, ready to testify, eager for someone with resources to finally hold Apex accountable. Marcus was going to give them that chance. He drafted an email to his legal team. Subject: Class Action Preparation. Apex Airways. Systematic Discrimination Team attached. Are 47 individual cases of discriminatory treatment by Apex Airways personnel between 2019 and present. Each case includes witness statements, internal complaint records, and settlement agreements where applicable. I want a class action lawsuit filed by end of week. All 47 plaintiffs contacted and offered representation at no cost. We're seeking damages, policy changes, and a consent decree requiring federal oversight of Apex's customer service practices. This isn't about the money, it's about creating precedent. No airline should be able to treat passengers like threats based on appearance. Coordinate with David on media strategy. I want this story told right. He sent it, closed the laptop, leaned back. His body ached, his head pounded, but underneath the pain was something cleaner, sharper, purpose. For 20 years, he'd been building toward this moment. The 18-year-old kid who'd missed his interview had grown into a man with the resources to dismantle the system that had failed him. It felt like gravity, like inevitability, like justice delayed but not denied. The intercom crackled. Captain Delaney's voice, stripped of its earlier authority, flat and defeated. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into New York. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. Marcus looked toward the cockpit. Delaney would be in there calculating, trying to figure out if there was any move left that could save him. There wasn't. The FBI had been notified. The evidence was overwhelming. 12 passenger videos, security camera footage from the holding room, Hannah's pending testimony, and Marcus's own statement. Delaney could lawyer up, could fight the charges, could drag it out for months. But he'd lost the moment he authorized Marcus's removal without investigating Vanessa's claims. The plane descended through clouds. New York appeared below, sprawling and dense, the late afternoon sun glinting off glass towers. JFK came into view, runways crisscrossing like scars on the landscape. The landing was smooth. Delaney might be a terrible human being, but he could fly a plane. The aircraft taxied, not toward a gate, toward a remote part of the tarmac where 3 black SUVs waited, along with 2 NYPD cruisers and a cluster of people in FBI windbreakers. Beyond them, Marcus could see news vans, at least 5 different networks, cameras already set up, reporters checking their hair and microphones. David had delivered. The plane stopped. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Nobody moved. The entire cabin understood that something significant was about to happen, and nobody wanted to miss it. The main cabin door opened. An FBI agent stepped aboard. Female, late 40s, gray hair pulled back, eyes that had seen every excuse and bought none of them. Her badge read Agent Rachel Torres. Captain Robert Delaney and Ms. Vanessa Cross, please come forward. Delaney emerged from the cockpit. He'd removed his captain's hat, unbuttoned his collar. He looked smaller without the uniform's authority propping him up. He walked down the aisle without looking at Marcus, without looking at anyone. Vanessa had to be escorted. She'd been crying for the last 3 hours, mascara streaked down her face, hands trembling. Hannah and another flight attendant helped her stand, guided her toward the front. When she passed Marcus's seat, she stopped. This isn't fair. I didn't mean... I was just doing my job. He looked... She caught herself. Too late. The admission hung there. He looked. He looked like he didn't belong. He looked like a threat. He looked black. Agent Torres's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her eyes narrow slightly. She'd heard it too. "Ma'am, you can explain your perspective to the federal prosecutor. Right now, I need you to exit the aircraft." Vanessa collapsed. Not dramatically, just her legs giving out, her body crumpling into the aisle. Hannah caught her, held her up while she sobbed incoherently. Delaney watched with the expression of a man who'd just realized he'd tied his fate to someone fundamentally unstable. Two agents moved forward, helped Vanessa to her feet, guided her toward the door. Delaney followed. Marcus watched them descend the stairs, watched Agent Torres read them their rights, watched the handcuffs click into place. Vanessa was still crying. Delaney stared at the ground, jaw clenched. The cameras captured everything. Marcus could see the reporters speaking into microphones, could imagine the captions already being written. Apex Airways employees arrested for assault. Billionaire CEO presses charges after violent removal. The story was writing itself, and for once Marcus wasn't fighting the narrative. He was feeding it. Preston Caldwell tried to sneak off the plane in the rush of deplaning passengers. He made it 3 steps before an FBI agent stopped him. "Mr. Caldwell, we need a statement regarding your witness testimony on Flight 447. Caldwell's face went from pale to crimson. He sputtered, reached for his phone. "I'm calling my wife. She's a federal judge. You can't just—" "Sir, your wife has recused herself from all matters involving this case. We're aware of the conflict of interest. Now, we can take your statement here, or we can continue this conversation at the federal building. Your choice." Caldwell chose the federal building because of course he did. Rich men always thought lawyers could magic away consequences. Sometimes they were right. This time, they weren't. Marcus was the last passenger off. He took his time, gathered his backpack, straightened his suit jacket. His reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man who'd been through a war. Blood-stained bandage on his temple, bruises darkening on his wrists, eyes that burned with something between exhaustion and vindication. He exited the plane, descended the stairs. Agent Torres waited at the bottom, along with a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Assistant U.S. Attorney James Reeves. "Mr. Blake, thank you for your cooperation. We'll need a formal statement, medical documentation of your injuries, and any evidence you've collected. I understand you have passenger videos?" Marcus pulled out his phone, forwarded 12 video files to the email address Reeves provided. "That's a start. My legal team has additional documentation, complaint histories, personnel records, internal emails, everything you need to establish pattern and practice." Reeves's eyebrows rose. "Pattern and practice? This isn't just about one incident? This is about 47 incidents over 5 years. Systematic discrimination by Apex Airways enabled by corporate leadership, buried with settlements and NDAs. Vanessa Cross and Robert Delaney are symptoms. Gerald Moss is the disease." Reeves glanced at Torres. Something passed between them, an unspoken communication that Marcus recognized from years of boardroom negotiations. They'd stumbled into something bigger than they'd anticipated. "Mr. Blake, I think we need to schedule a longer conversation. Tomorrow morning, Federal Building, 9 a.m.? I'll be there, with my attorneys and 47 witnesses." Marcus walked past them toward the terminal. Camera crews rushed forward, microphones extended, questions shouting over each other. He ignored them. Not yet. The story needed to build, needed to reach critical mass before he shaped it. David was waiting inside the terminal, laptop bag over his shoulder, expression caught between admiration and concern. "You look like hell." "I feel worse." "Hospital?" "Hotel, shower, sleep, in that order." David fell into step beside him, navigating through the crowd. Passengers from Flight 447 were telling their stories to anyone who'd listen. Sofia Martinez from 3C was being interviewed by CNN, explaining through tears how she'd watched an innocent man get brutalized. The tech executive was uploading his footage to YouTube in real time, titling it, "The Slap Heard Round the World Full Unedited." Marcus and David made it to the car, a black Mercedes SUV with tinted windows. The driver pulled away from JFK, merged onto the Van Wyck Expressway, headed toward Manhattan. Marcus closed his eyes, let the city noise wash over him. Horns honking, sirens wailing, the constant thrum of 8 million people compressed into a few square miles. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails, texts, calls. He silenced it. David typed on his laptop, periodically reading updates aloud. "Stock market's going to be interesting tomorrow. Apex is already down 12% in after-hours trading. Investors are panicking. Bloomberg's running a feature on your acquisition. Forbes wants to know if you're planning a hostile takeover wave across the airline industry. Just this one. I'm not interested in running an airline empire. I'm interested in fixing one company and making an example out of it." Well, you've got everyone's attention. Twitter's on fire, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. You're either the hero of the century or a calculating opportunist, depending on who you ask. Let them debate. Debate means engagement. Engagement means this doesn't get buried. They reached the hotel, the Peninsula, 5th Avenue, overlooking Central Park. Marcus had stayed here dozens of times, but tonight the opulence felt obscene. $2,300 a night for a room while Vanessa Cross sat in a holding cell, and Jamal Henderson struggled to pay student loans because he'd missed that flight to his father's funeral. The contradiction wasn't lost on Marcus. He was fighting inequality from a position of extreme privilege. Some people would call that hypocrisy. He called it leverage. You couldn't change the system from outside it. You had to infiltrate, accumulate power, then use that power to dismantle the structures that had granted it in the first place. David helped him to the room, ordered room service, made sure Marcus took ibuprofen and drank water. Then he left, promising to handle the media circus and keep the lawyers on standby. Marcus stripped off the suit, examined himself in the bathroom mirror. The bruises on his wrists had darkened to purple-black. His shoulder was swollen, tender to the touch. The cut on his temple had stopped bleeding but would scar. He looked like he'd been in a fight, which he supposed he had. He showered, let hot water pound against sore muscles, watched blood-tinged water circle the drain. The physical pain was manageable. The emotional weight was heavier. 47 victims, 20 years of planning, 1 day of execution, and they were just getting started. He dried off, climbed into bed, set an alarm for 7 a.m. Sleep came fast, dreamless and heavy. The alarm jolted him awake 6 hours later. His body protested every movement. The bruises had settled overnight into a spectacular array of colors. He popped more ibuprofen, ordered coffee, pulled up his laptop. The news cycle had exploded. Every major outlet led with the story. Billionaire assaulted on flight, buys airline in revenge. Apex Airways employees arrested after viral video. Marcus Blake, Silicon Valley's newest activist investor. The framing varied, but the core narrative was consistent. A man had been wronged. The man had power. The man was using that power to exact justice. Some articles dug deeper, uncovered the 47 other victims, began connecting dots. The Washington Post ran a feature on algorithmic discrimination in the airline industry. The New York Times interviewed Dr. Mehta, who broke her NDA to tell her story. NPR did a segment on the economic incentives that rewarded companies for burying complaints rather than addressing them. Marcus's phone lit up with messages from the other victims, some thanking him, some asking if it was real, if they'd actually get their day in court, some just sharing their stories, needing someone to witness their pain. He read every message, responded to every one. By 8:30, his coffee was cold and his calendar was full. 9 a.m. meeting with federal prosecutors, 10:30 conference call with the legal team about the class action. Noon lunch with Arthur to discuss the board meeting strategy. 2 p.m. interview with CNN, his first public statement. 4 p.m. meeting with Apex's soon-to-be former board of directors to discuss transition plans. The day stretched ahead like a battlefield. Marcus suited up. Navy this time, white shirt, burgundy tie, and headed out to face it. The federal building in Lower Manhattan was a brutalist concrete monument to bureaucracy. Marcus arrived at 8:55, flanked by 2 attorneys from his firm's white-collar defense team. They were led to a conference room where Assistant U.S. Attorney Reeves waited with Agent Torres and 3 other people Marcus didn't recognize. Reeves gestured to chairs. "Mr. Blake, thank you for coming. I want to introduce you to some people who've become very interested in your case. This is Maria Gonzalez from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. This is Thomas Park from the FAA's Office of Civil Rights. And this is Jennifer Wu, attorney for the plaintiffs in Henderson versus Apex Airways, which was filed yesterday on behalf of the 47 victims you've identified." Marcus shook hands, took a seat. The room felt charged, expectant. Reeves opened a folder, pulled out photographs. Marcus recognized them immediately, screenshots from the passenger videos, his face bloodied, Vanessa's theatrical performance, Mitchell's hands on his wrists, the moment his head hit the doorframe. "Mr. Blake, we've reviewed the evidence you provided. We've also obtained security footage from LAX and conducted preliminary interviews with several witnesses. Based on what we've seen, we're prepared to charge Ms. Cross and Captain Delaney with assault under federal aviation statutes, filing false reports, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Officer Mitchell faces additional charges for excessive use of force." Maria Gonzalez leaned forward, her expression serious. "But we're also looking at something bigger. Your research into Apex's complaint history reveals a pattern that goes beyond individual bad actors. We're talking about systematic discrimination, enabled by corporate policy, incentivized by profit motives. The DOJ is opening a formal investigation into Apex Airways for civil rights violations. We'll be requesting access to all internal communications, training materials, algorithmic systems, and settlement agreements." Thomas Park from the FAA added his piece. "The FAA has regulatory authority over airline safety, but we've been expanding our interpretation of safety to include passenger welfare. What happened to you and the 46 others represents a failure of corporate culture that we believe poses a systemic risk. We'll be conducting our own investigation, and depending on findings, we may recommend sanctions up to and including suspension of Apex's operating certificate." The words hung in the air. Suspension of operating certificate. That meant grounding the entire fleet. Thousands of flights canceled, millions of passengers stranded, billions in losses. It was the nuclear option, the regulatory equivalent of a death sentence for an airline. Marcus met Park's gaze. "I don't want Apex destroyed. I want it reformed." Jennifer Wu spoke for the first time, her voice sharp and precise. "Reform requires accountability. The 47 plaintiffs I represent aren't interested in another settlement with an NDA attached. They want their stories told. They want policy changes. They want to know that the next person who looks like them won't be treated like a threat. That's what I want too." Wu studied him, evaluating, measuring sincerity against self-interest. "Then we're on the same side. The class action seeks damages, yes, but also injunctive relief. We're asking for a consent decree requiring Apex to implement third-party oversight, mandatory bias training, elimination of discriminatory algorithms, and a transparent complaint review process. We're asking for the impossible to become policy." Marcus smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd managed since boarding Flight 447. "The impossible is just something nobody's been willing to pay for yet. I'm willing. How much do you need?" The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Marcus had committed Blake Ventures to funding the class action litigation. providing expert witnesses and supporting the DOJ and FAA investigations with full access to Apex's records once he had control. In return, the plaintiffs agreed to coordinate their stories, present a unified front, and let Marcus serve as the public face of the movement they were building. It was a partnership built on mutual interest rather than trust, but Marcus had built a career on exactly those kinds of arrangements. Trust could come later. Right now, they needed action. He left the federal building at noon, climbed into the waiting Mercedes, headed to lunch with Arthur. His phone buzzed with an alert. The market had opened. Apex Airways stock had dropped another 18%. Investors were fleeing. The board was in crisis mode. Gerald Moss had been unreachable all morning. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned.